Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Duggan with IGN, and I'm here with
Tate Phoebe.
And welcome to part 2 of our Blackrock Mountain complete set assessment analysis preview.
We're analyzing these cards.
Yeah, we're doing something with them, but this is part 2 of it. In the first part, we showed our top 5 picks for the most powerful cards in Blackrock Mountain, and you can go check that out in the video right above this one. But
Hashtag easy legend.
Yeah, exactly. But in this one, we're just going to be talking about all of the class cards in Blackrock Mountain, starting with one that surprisingly was on neither of our lists, and that is Flamewaker, which for my money, is totally nuts good.
I think it's good. I'm not going to go nuts good, but I mean, it's clearly there for Burn Mage.
It's nuts good. It's also there for Mech Mage. Mech Mage gets huge value out of this card, not to mention the parallels between this card and Blast Mage, which synergizes with the mechs that give you the spare part cards that enable this card, so there's just like a quadruple synergy going on in that deck, also with Mono Worm, too.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it's what do you replace this with? And it could replace Tinkertown, but Tinkertown does give you one of those spare parts. At 3 mana, and I was thinking of it in terms of like Harvest Golem for some of the more control-y mages, but it's ridiculous. If there's 2 minions on the board, you Frostbolt 1 to remove it. You get 2 random damage. Hopefully it hits. It's like a double Knife Juggler for playing a single spell. It's awesome.
And it should be mentioned that this will work with the coin too. So the coin has always been good because of Mono Worm for mages, but now it's even better. And the great part about this card is it's not tied to mechs, so if for some reason mechs fall out of favor, which I cannot see a scenario where they will, at least in this adventure, this card can kind of live on, so to speak. All right, the next mage card is Dragon's Breath, and Tate, I know you hate this card, so tell me why.
I don't think it's that good. Yeah, it's because in the scenario of a burn deck, you're not removing that many minions because a lot of your damage is going to be dedicated to face. 3 minions have to die for it to be essentially as good as Frostbolt. I mean, it's 1 more damage, but you lose the freeze, pick your poison. So just for that, if you draw this late game, it's a disaster. 5 mana for 4 damage if you can't affect the board. I know a lot of people have been talking about Flame Strike and how you could wipe the board and play this for free, but if you wipe the board, what are you going to do with this? Like, there's no minions left.
So I think Flame Strike's downfall has been it does 4 damage to everything, but sometimes there's some stuff that is too fat for 4 damage to kill. And this could finish that. That being said, like, what makes a Hearthstone card good is not just its combo potential, but its ability to be good in a number of different situations and kind of stand on its own 2 legs, which I agree this card does not do.
Yeah, I just find there to be this card doesn't quite make sense yet, and maybe I just haven't seen it, but if you kill a bunch of minions, what are you going to cast this on?
Yeah.
And then all you're left is the face.
Right, right. So you deal 4 damage to their face, maybe not the best for 5 mana, but we will see. Maybe in Arena, who knows? I'm kind of on the same page with you in the sense that I really don't think it's that good in the context of all the other tools Mage has available to them. So now we're moving on to your most played and maybe favorite class Rogue, and we're starting out with Dark Iron Skulker, the 5-cost 4/3, deal 2 damage to all undamaged enemy minions. When I first saw this card, my first thought was, oh my god, it's a Consecrate for 1 more mana and it gives you a 4/3. So what are your thoughts on this card?
I really like it. I actually don't know what type of Rogue deck this fits in. It feels like this is going to deal with decks that overwhelm you, Paladin. It's a good counter to, like, if they happen to do a turn 4 muster, or there's still dudes left over that you couldn't. It's certainly better than Fan of Knives in the fact that it gives you a minion but doesn't draw a card. I don't know. I haven't been able to like hone in on how much I like this card. The undamaged nature of it makes it a little bit more questionable because it could, if you're playing Rogue, often you just put damage on stuff to draw your spells to finish it off. But I'm unsure.
Yeah, also this doesn't work into the whole spell damage Rogue, which saw a bit of play at the start of GVG and a bit before.
I think the deck that this fits in is something that's not in the current meta, and it could be really good because it seems like a great counter to something like Zoo, but it could also be hard to play. If there's Nerubian Eggs on the other side, do you want to play this? I'm not sure.
Right. Okay, moving on to your number 2 pick for the best card in Blackrock Mountain, Gang Up. So we've talked a bit at length about this card, but why don't you just give us a quick rundown on why you think it's so awesome?
Yeah, in our top 5 video, I mean, you can get our full analysis of this, but to me, it's there's 6 additional cards in your deck, which Rogue can mill through their cards and draw a lot of cards really fast. I'm just excited about this card because I think it introduces new ways to play for Rogue that aren't currently part of it. I don't see it necessarily improving the current Rogue decks as much as opening up things like Mill Rogue, things like Heavy Control Rogue. If you're sitting late game, you don't have many cards left, they drop their big minion, you play this, you get 3 copies of it. That can be a huge difference maker, especially when there's not any other way to get 3 copies of a single card in your deck.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to the Druid, which, for my money, didn't get a ton of love in Blackrock Mountain, and that is evidenced by the first card, Volcanic Lumberer, which, yeah, I don't know. I mean, your pick for, I believe it was either number 4 or number 3 in the top 5, was Volcanic Drake, but I think part of the reason why that was is because it's a neutral card. It has a lot of application in a couple of different decks, including, like, Handlock, Paladin,
any type of rush deck that's going to be trading minions.
Or anything that can board clear very efficiently. Druid is not one of those decks that can do that. Your options are Swipe, your options are Starfall, your options are... Actually, the one synergy that I thought was kind of interesting with this was Poison Seeds.
Yeah, that was actually the first card that came to mind for this one. I mean, you look at this, you think it's an Ironbark Protector, but maybe worse, maybe better, depending on your perception of it. Probably a little bit better because you're most likely going to get it for less than 8 mana.
Yeah, probably.
Is the Ironbark range.
You can also just trade up for this. Yeah, that's a really good point.
And if you Poison Seeds their board, you're leaving them with a bunch of 2/2s, which this should trade with, but it's in big game range. I mean, it's just not in a great spot. Even if you're swiping to clear the board, let's say you clear 4 minions, this still costs 5 mana, so that you need turn 9 for that type of play. I mean, it can create some big swings, but I can see it being pretty dead in a lot of cases.
Ancient of War is pretty much doing all the stuff that would kind of want this to accomplish, which it would just be, you know, stopping the bleeding from an aggro deck. But in this form, like, you're dealing 7 damage, which most of their minions probably have about, if it's an aggro rush deck or a Zoo Warlock or a Mech Mage or what have you, most of their minions probably have about 4 health. So 7 seems a little bit overkill. Anyway, let's move on to Druid of the Flame. Maybe the worst card in the set.
Well, I hate this card. I mean, I've never wanted a 5/2. It's like slightly better than Magma Rager. Sweet.
Yeah, I'd actually like to point out that, like, it's a really good example of how class cards are slightly below curve. So Mana Rager is a 3-cost 5/1. This is a 3-cost 5/2. They're both common. So you can kind of see the comparison there. But yeah, continue.
The only thing I can see is if this makes Beast Druid a thing. That's because it's worth noting the 2 transformations are both beasts. So it enables something like Druid of the Fang. That could be the only deck that I can see this card making any sense in. Because right now the 3-cost spot goes to Shade of Naxxramas, which is pretty much a lock in any Force of Nature deck.
Which is the majority of Druid decks.
Yeah, and this one, I mean, a 2/5, there's, and we'll cover them later in the set, there's cards that are just strictly better than that in this set at 3 mana.
I completely agree. All right, moving on to Paladin, which has one of your favorite cards, but then it also has Solemn Vigil, which... the obvious thing here to think is Equality Consecration, and then you play Solemn Vigil for free, you draw 2 cards. That's great. That can be problematic in Paladin decks that are trying to fend off aggro. Drawing cards is never a bad thing. And obviously you can just trade. So with Muster, this works out fantastically well because you're incentivized to kind of kill off your lesser minions with stuff like Bolvar 4 Dragon. What are your thoughts on this card? I'm very curious.
I actually really like this card. Paladin right now really struggles with card draw. That's the reason you see things like Acolyte of Pain and the other card draw. Lay on Hands comes just way too late sometimes. This, I think in most scenarios, will be an Arcane Intellect. You're trading 1 minion for 1 minion, and this costs 3 for 2. It's essentially the same thing. But
which is not a bad deal.
No, not a bad deal. But it also, like, if there's any class that benefits from minions dying to reduce the cost of cards, which is this new mechanic, it's Paladin, because you
Right.
have muster, you have a way to flood the board. So I can actually see this being really good, because Divine Favor is situational. That card's hard to make work. The card draw has been the weakness, and I'm hoping that this is what enables kind of that mid-range deck, because right now it's either super late game with Control or super quick game with Divine Favor. This falls in between that. So
Speaking of Paladin mid-range, Dragon Consort.
yeah,
Take it away.
This card's great. I mean, what else do you need to see? I mean, anything that makes your minions cheaper. Dragons are generally good. Of the 19 dragons I believe there are, most are really good cards. So being able to play it for 2 less, turn 7 Ysera, turn 6 Chromagus, like those are huge plays that will dramatically change the game.
Turn 7 Alex Drowsy, you don't just have to use it on late game stuff too. You can use it to enable stuff like Hungry Dragon for 2 mana if you haven't played it already, if you're drawing into it. And also, just like we did in the top 5, it's definitely worth bringing up that this effect persists through turns and affects cards you haven't drawn yet too. So you're going to get value out of this card if you play it. There's no way they can take that away from you.
Yeah, and even on its own, ignore the fact that the effect is amazing. A 5/5 for 5 is totally fine.
That's a dragon.
Yeah, there's
And can benefit from stuff like Blackwing Technician and the other Blackwing.
the fake fire elemental guy.
Yeah, the neutral pool fire elemental. We'll get into him in our Corruptor. Yes. Okay, so let's move on to the Priest. There is one card in. There's actually, you know what? I kind of like both of these cards. So Twilight Whelp is a card that totally sucks if you draw it and do not have another dragon in your hand. But if you do, you're able to combo it with all the kind of cool stuff you want to combo early game, which is your hero power, Northshire Cleric. This kind of replaces Zombie Chow for me in that kind of like Priest mid-range, probably control. But that being said, adding 2 more 1-drops into your deck in a Priest control deck, I'm not sold on.
Yeah, I mean, is this better than Zombie Chow? That's the question, because Zombie Chow has other applications with Akanai, and you don't need a dragon to make the effect. I really want to like this card. I really do, but I'm not sure I do, because if you go first, you have 3 cards, you get Twilight Whelp. Let's say you're playing a dragon deck and you have something like Onyxia in your hand. Do you keep that huge minion that you're not going to be able to play just to enable the 2 health on this, or do you mulligan it trying to get a cheaper dragon? I think it doesn't quite fit. I can see it being the card that's kind of meaningless if you're using a lot of the holding effects in your Priest deck to just be able to enable them all game long. But other than that, I think I would land on Zombie Chow. I'd rather play that.
Okay, so the next Priest card is Resurrect, and this card is subject to much debate on many different channels. What are your thoughts on it straight away?
I love that they're bringing the graveyard into Hearthstone, just as a concept. I hope this is their first test into using a graveyard type mechanic. I love playing Black and Magic for that reason. I think this taps into that. So I'm excited by what the card could represent for the future of Hearthstone. I'm not sure this card is good. I can see 2 scenarios. I could see if you're playing a lot of early minions to basically turn 1, play Zombie Chow, and if you're really trying to keep the tempo up, that dies, you get it right back.
Right, or the other fantastic application for this is Injured Blade Master, because it resurrects without triggering the battle cry effect of it losing 4 of its health.
Yep. Yeah, so I think there's some really cool applications for it. And the other would be if you're playing a really heavy minion deck where you have mostly big minions and you're using... Priest is the most equipped for early game control between the Shadow Word Deaths and Pains, which I actually think Priest got a silent buff during this release, because if you look at all the minions that were released, there's either none or only 1 that has 4 attack. So Shadow Word Pain and Shadow Word Death become very useful, and so if you're running heavy spells like that to remove early, I can see Resurrect supporting a major, huge minion game.
It's also worth noting that cards like Shadow Madness, or anything that gives you temporary control of a card and then you kill your opponent's minion that is now friendly. When those die, they get added to the pool that you can pull from with this card. So that's interesting shenanigans interaction. I don't think that's ever going to work itself into any kind of competitive play, and I kind of doubt this card will either, but who knows? Perhaps. Moving on to Demon Wrath for the Warlock deck. Now, Demon Warlock is something that is around, for sure, in the current meta of Hearthstone. And it's certainly gotten a buff with this card and the following card. So I guess my question to you is, does this replace Hellfire?
In a demon-based deck? Yeah, probably. I was not excited about this card, and then I actually heard Noxious just rave about it. Which made me start to second guess it. I do think Demon Lock can become a thing. Blizzard clearly wants an all-out Demon Lock. Like, that's it seems like every expansion there's more and more demons. It doesn't damage your hero. It would damage your own minions, but you'd need to commit fully to the demon motif.
Right. Or you know, the other thing with this card is your early minions need to be demons, and then potentially when you start getting into like the kind of 8 or 9 drops or even 7 drops, you can bring in some of those legendaries that are not demons and still see value from this card.
Yep. I do think this card's going to be good. It's probably the most notable piece of it is that it's 3 mana instead of 4, so when you're comparing against something like Hellfire, it comes out a turn earlier, which can thwart aggro if you're playing like kind of that mid-rangey demon deck trying to get past.
Okay, and the next Warlock card is Imp Gang Boss. Again, for my money, I really dislike this card, but I want to hear your thoughts on it before I completely smash it.
Okay. I don't love this card, but I don't think it's as bad as everyone thinks. The 1/1 Imp, I think of like a Death Rattle that can't be silenced. Or I guess it can be silenced, but it functions like a Death Rattle. So if someone removes this with like Eviscerate, you're getting a 1/1 Imp. But then there's the opportunities where every time you trade with it, if you can trade with a 3/2, you get a 1/1 Imp. When they finish it off, you get another 1/1 Imp. Those are going to be demons, so it fits in with the whole demon vibe they're going for. So I can see something like Demon Zoo coming together with just a lot of low-cost demons, and then you have Demon Caller to just summon more out for free. I can see that having potential now. I'm not sure this is going to be good, but combo it with something like Demon Fire, where it becomes, what would it make it? It would make it a 7/9 or something ridiculous.
Something like that,
yeah,
right?
Something ridiculous. That has a ton of potential. So I'm not ready to write it off, but I think you kind of got to think of the damage thing like a Death Rattle.
Sure, and
that can happen multiple times.
So I think if your goal here is
to lose.
Yeah, well, I mean, if your goal here is to create demons, then Imp Master is superior to this card in the sense that it enables it in the most efficient way on its own. That being said, is summoning a bunch of 1/1s even good in the first place and something you want to aim for in a demon deck? And I would argue no, unless your aim is to just have a whole bunch of different targets you can buff with various things, or bring out Mal'Ganis or something.
Good.
Implosion is good, but that's because it does damage. And then the imps after that are just kind of like insult to injury, and it always hits for 4. I swear to God, there's some shenanigans mechanics going on in there. Anyway, but yeah, I don't think this card, I think that, number one, what it's trying to do isn't that great in the first place, and number two, the way in which I think it does it isn't good. Okay, so moving on to Warrior, which the 2 cards for Warrior, one in particular is pretty bad, but this one, like, I don't think it's fantastic, but I think it has some serious potential. And face Warrior with weapons and with Kokron Elite, or Korkron Elite, had momentum for a time, and it was a Warrior deck that I really enjoyed playing. That being said, I'm playing Wallet Warrior. I have been for a long time. And this is cool in the sense that, like, yes, it works with Cruel Taskmaster, it works with Whirlwind, it works with Death's Bite, it works with all those enabling things that I'm damaging minions, then my Frothing Berserker or my Armor Smith is helping that as well. But dealing 2 damage to their face, not necessarily my goal. It's much more tempo, it's much more about controlling the board, and it's much more about save Cruel Taskmaster for something like Gramash. But that being said, like, I love the interaction with this and Bouncing Blade. Especially if you have a Grim Patron down, you have Frothing Berserker down, you have Axe Flinger down, and then you Commanding Shout Bouncing Blade onto their full board. That is the dream. It's amazing. But will that happen? Probably not.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this enables some cool things with Warrior. I would love to really play with those mechanics a little bit more. I think the Emperor that reduces the cost of your cards opens up some crazy combos with this. The thing that struck me with this one is I immediately calculated, now that Warsong Commander is fixed and might see play, is how much would it be if I played this Warsong Commander to give it charge, 2 Inner Fires, and a Cruel Taskmaster, which is like the 6 damage plus an additional 6 damage to this guy, which ended up being...
How are you getting the Inner Fires?
No, Inner Rage.
Inner Rage, okay, all right. Yeah.
So, and then I concluded that that's 5 cards for 16 damage. Probably not that good, but it at least came to mind. I want to see what some of these warrior cards do with... actually, some of these new cards with Warsong Commander, because that might be playable now.
So let's move on to a card that we will spend no time on, which is Revenge. The thing I will say about this card is, I guess the idea here is to kind of stem the tide of an aggro deck coming at you. They reduce you to below 12 health. You play this, you kill other minions, you start flooding the board with Shield Maiden. But I think that there are way better ways to do that, and honestly, 12 health is really low when you're playing against aggro. Like, if you're at 12 health, yes, you can recover, but they may just kill you too, and there are better things you need to be doing at that point in the game than dealing 3 damage to all the minions.
I mean, you said I don't like this card. It's worse than Whirlwind.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that seems to be the consensus. Core Rager, your favorite card of the entire set.
I hate this card. I understand what it's trying to do. It's trying to change kind of Rush Hunter to empty your hand and put out a huge minion. All I can say is, best case scenario, your hand is empty, you put out a 7/7 on turn 4. If that gets big gamed, you have lost that game. Like, if they can deal with this when you get the best case scenario, it's over. Like, yeah. Hunter has no way to recover. So this card is terrible. I hate it. So something I kind of want to touch on is just that, again, Hunter has been a much hated class for those who play against it, and every time it's seen success in the ladder, the kind of cornerstone of the deck is nerfed because everybody just hates the way it works. Undertaker, Unleash the Hounds, Starving Buzzard. Starving Buzzard, right. And so I see Core Rager as a way for Blizzard to take control of that meta and do Face Hunter on their terms. That being said, I don't think anybody's going to use this. Nope. There's certainly a possibility there, and I could see potential with it with Tundra Rhino.
Yeah, Tundra Rhino, and then maybe you hit him in the face for 7. But there are better ways to do that. Specifically, like kill command for 5, and then just use your hero power. I mean, that's a 9 mana combo for 7 damage. I'd play King Crush. Not the best. Okay, all right. But another Hunter card that is actually quite good and good for Face Hunters and kind of enables it in a way that hopefully isn't super annoying, but probably end up will be, is Quick Shot. And the thing I like about this is with Face Hunter, you are trying to, the goal of the deck is already kind of to empty your hand, to get things on the board, and to start hitting. And this allows you to cycle through with the added bonus of doing a little bit of damage. Yeah, I mean, this is purely better than Dark Bomb. It's Dark Bomb with a chance to draw a card. I mean, this just shows that, Blizzard uses power creep in a subtle way as a tool. I don't think they're intentionally just each expansion is going to, every card's going to crush the last one. But this is a clear example of it. It's the exact same effect, but better. Great. Yeah. Love it. All right, so we're ending on, I swear I didn't do this intentionally, but maybe I did, 2 of my favorite cards from the set, and these are the Shaman cards. Shaman is a deck that I initially shied away from. I came to love. It's certainly not my best deck or necessarily my favorite, but there are a lot of decks that I do love under the Shaman umbrella, and one of those decks is the Earth Elemental Ancestral Spirit, Reincarnate. Reincarnate. Yeah. It combos. You just have a whole bunch of stuff. And the crappy part about that deck is you're always locked out. And like you said, locking yourself out on turn 6 when you want to play a Fire Elemental, totally sucks because that is an amazing card. But now with the card we will see after this, which is Lava Shock, that's not as much of a problem. And this card, just to add on to it, gives you, super huge board presence early, and then you can also, if you haven't necessarily drawn like an Earth Elemental, you can use this as kind of a backup plan for dumping your Ancestral Spirits on, trading, or, enabling with a Reincarnate. So I love it. I love this card. Yeah, I agree. I think this card's great. I think we should jump to Lava Shock because one of the reasons that this is great is because of this card.
This enables so much potential in Shaman that is so bogged down by Overload that, I mean, it's theoretical that this card can cost you -3 mana. Like, if you had overloaded yourself with Lightning Storm and then that turn you play an Earth Elemental, then Lava Shock, you gain 5 mana that otherwise doesn't exist. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, this has totally made me look at Shaman cards differently, not just Fire or Lightning Storm and Feral Spirit, which are the kind of de facto Overload cards, but it's had me take another look at Unbound Elemental now that overloading isn't necessarily a deterrent. It's kind of almost an incentive, sort of. With Unbound Elemental, Lava Shock, and then obviously with Earth Elemental and even like Neptulon, anything that overloads you, you're potentially not seeing the downside of that, which is nuts in an awesome way, and is maybe my favorite card design in the whole set, just because it had me ravenously digging through my Hearthstone card library to see, oh my god, what can I use this with?
Yeah, it changes the class.
Right, and 2 damage for I mean, there are better damage. Yeah, right. There are better damage options, but like 2 damage for 2 mana, not terrible.
Well, 2 damage for possibly negative mana.
Right, fantastic. So. In that case, fantastic. All right, thank you very much for joining us. My name is James Duggan.
Tate Phoebe.
And make sure to tune in. We are not done yet, so make sure to tune into part 3 of our Hearthstone Blackrock Mountain. I don't know where I got them. Mountain. Blackrock Mountain. Card set analysis preview thing.
Extravaganza.
Hooray. And in that video, of course, we will be checking out the neutral card pool, which has all the awesome, dope legendaries. So make sure you stick around for that. Just scroll down on this page and click that play button. Thank you very much for all things Hearthstone. Keep it right here on IGN.